All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Matt, do it right, baby. Do it right. Matt is our producer for the day. Albert, who was, Albert was scheduled to be here, but a series of events have transpired to prevent him from being here. And Tony had a series of events transpire in his life to prevent him from being here.
Thanks, Tony.
So we are in a situation where this new guy who just came into the game is being charged with running this ship today. He is Matt, and he is great. But it is definitely, it's a lot to handle on a, when you had like an hour's training. But he's already done one, and he's been pretty impressive. Kim is here.
Kim, how are you?
She's promised today to try to help instead of just getting in the way and being, objecting to everything as she normally does.
What? I blame you.
Well, all right.
Thank
I'm saying, maybe
I'm glad it's on tape. I don't have to keep saying it.
Yeah, I got it. All right, today we've got a lot. First of all, Timothy Snyder, the brilliant public intellectual and historian, will be here. I know. He's coming in a short order. Less than an hour he'll be here. And I also mentioned that to Gary Dietrich, the brilliant political analyst for iHeart Media, he will be here. So you've got a couple of major minds that you'll hear from. I will get into the announcement. Obviously, we'll talk about Ukraine. We'll talk about the scrambling of the world to handle the Donald Trump and White House pivot on Ukraine. It's, on one level, I was going to say it's inexplicable. On another level, it's quite explainable. It seems like the trail of breadcrumbs is pretty easy to find on this one. But that said, we'll just talk about some of what's happened with European allies, traditionally American allies, by treaty allies, NATO allies, what's happened to them as a result of that Zelensky meeting and the throwdown in the White House. So that we will get to. As I say, we'll also speak with Gary Dietrich about what's happening in California. Gavin Newsom, one of the bright lights of the Democratic Party, he has something that he is uncorking. This is the new beginning for Gavin Newsom. So if you are a Californian, or if he is like the type of Democrat that you feel might represent the future to actually win an election, we'll talk about what he's doing with Gary Dietrich, who, as you know, reports from Sacramento, and he is the analyst for the CBS stations and also on iHeart Media, as I say. Now, I don't want to start, because I am a fine American, as you know, and a great patriot. I don't want to start without acknowledging one of the great industries birthed in this country. But from the looks of it last night, very healthily populated by immigrants and those who work overseas as well, from all countries, with a true international flavor. I'm talking about the movie industry and the Oscars, everybody. Yes. Now, I know, as good Americans, Kim, I'm sure you watched the Oscars, start to finish.
Highlights, yeah.
Highlights?
Highlights, not start to finish.
Oh.
I watched the clips after the fact.
No. Well.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah, I don't know, Kim. There's some cracks in your patriotism.
How could I watch the Oscars when I was preparing for the Mark Thompson show? I mean,
I don't.
What?
I don't believe. Let me ask you, Matt. Matt, were you tuned into the Oscars last night?
A little bit of it. I saw a little bit of it. A little long for me.
Oh.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Yes, you guys are really, I'm really quite, I don't know. Mick Jagger was the best presenter of the night. Woohoo, says Randy. Yeah. There were some really great moments. As usual, there are a lot of movies, and as usual, there are a lot of movies that you typically haven't seen. I mean, there are people who make a move. We try to cram and get all the movies in before Oscar night, but look, let's be clear about something. And I've mentioned this to you before. Watch the whole thing, said someone. I forget. I couldn't see. Oscars are always too long, says Mindy Lee. You see, Mindy, I wish they'd never end. All the glamour, the stars. Did someone get slapped, said Rich. No, that really would have been much better. But I find the Oscars start to finish for Eileen and me. Yes, Lee Kopp, a great patriot, along with his wife. I find the Oscars boring. Sorry, says Gil. Wow.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Gil, I think you too may have to be called in. I'm sorry. So the one thing I'll say is that the Oscars are, as you're aware, and I've noted this before for you, the Oscars are BS, right? I mean, they're not. You can't compare movies and say you can personally say I like the movie more than another movie, but to get together as artists and say this piece is better than that piece, it's absurd. You know, the best director, you'd have to have them directing the same piece, obviously, you know, and then you could look at their direction with the same material and then decide who's the best director that year. I mean, but obviously it's one of those things that has morphed and evolved into what it is, which is a huge publicity machine for Hollywood, and it can be a fun night of entertainment and handicapping who's going to win, et cetera. You know, creating the horse race element is part of what keeps people involved. So Kieran Culkin acceptance speech was a hoot, says John Watson. Yeah, I mean, and that's, I'll say Kieran Culkin, who was terrific. I thought Jeremy Strong, who played in the movie called The Apprentice, which was about the relationship between Donald Trump and Roy Cohn. It was a brilliant film. In fact, I thought not enough was made of that movie, but Strong was definitely best supporting actor. And yet, Kieran Culkin, well, don't get me wrong, Culkin's great, but that sort of is his jam, what he was, but he did, look, he served it up great, but that is his jam. It was a little less of a stretch. I thought Strong was immersive in the way he inhabited the character of Roy Cohn. It was brilliant. Angora was not the best movie, says Dillette. Oh, you see, there you go. Now, we liked Angora a lot, but I don't know what best movie means. Again, this is crazy. Strong was strong, says Tom. It really was. Maga Mars says, I watched The Apprentice last night. Trump actor had a Seinfeld accent the entire time. Well, Trump is a New Yorker. I thought actually his take on the way he spoke, remember, this is a younger Donald Trump. I thought actually that was quite good. But anyway, it's Angora, not Angora. Thank you, John. I thought something was weird about that. Yeah, it's Anora, right. And Anora, we really enjoyed it. Rich people giving rich people awards. I know, and isn't it great? Now that is America. That is America. Rich people giving rich people. So the one thing I wanted you to know is there are two little elements that we kind of thought were entertaining, and because we're not going to do a big Oscar thing, we kind of already have. But Kim found a revelation, which is that In-N-Out is apparently the favorite fallback, or I guess it's the place people go when they're after the Oscars going somewhere, and then they're going to go to a party.
It started a couple of years ago with Paul Giamatti, who was pictured and stopped by In-N-Out. And apparently now it's become a bit of a thing where more and more of these stars after the Oscars stop by In-N-Out. And I just thought that was kind of funny.
The churn of people was so continuous that no matter where I stood as a reporter, I was in someone's way. The staff operating at an impressive clip, turning over tables and keeping everything humming along and clean. At several points, it got so slammed that the location security guard had to become the de facto bouncer, prevent overflow from becoming worse. Really fun. Really fun. Anyway, congratulations to all the Oscar winners. And if you got your In-N-Out, you know, the big parties in Hollywood generally are in the studios, and they're two enduring parties, one Vanity Fair and the other is Elton John's party. But I mean, they may ultimately be supplanted by other parties, but those are kind of regulars. And then I thought I would make you aware of something that I wasn't aware of, and I love this. Over the weekend, there was an Oscar ceremony for not directors and not stars and supporting actors and sound design, and it was an award show for extras, the people who are participating in the creation of this motion picture, but they're not principals, right? They're not
Well, that's fun.
speaking lines. They are atmospheres is what it's called, right? So those people, background actors, they have been for 7 years recognizing each other at their own ceremony. It's like the Oscars for background players.
Like, what are the awards? Most inconspicuous? Like, does the best job not looking at the camera? What are the awards?
They're called the blurries, and there are things like what you're talking about: best background actor ensemble and favorite casting director, best first responder look. They handed out a Lifetime Achievement Award to a longtime background actor who has been in a lot of different, period pieces and other stuff.
Sure.
He was in Hello, Dolly in 1969 as a 12-year-old, okay? And they also recognize background actors from A Man on the Inside, which is a Netflix show, the medical drama Dr. Odyssey, the FX thriller Grotesquerie. So the blurries are kind of tongue-in-cheek, they say, at times, but they do want respect. These actors want respect.
I guess it's a job being an extra, huh?
Yeah, it's a job, and it's not a job that is well compensated a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So they, the background actors are the other people at the Friends coffee hangout, Central Perk, or the other drinkers at the Cheers bar, or whatever. So they came up with this name, the Blurries, and that's what they are. And they held it in Los Angeles this past weekend. So that is your Oscars wrap. In and out, Blurries. And I found out that my colleagues, not the Patriots I thought they will, barely watched the Oscars.
So sad.
It's completely inappropriate.
It was very inappropriate.
Yeah, thank you. You're good. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Eugenio de Arenal, thank you. We are a crowd-funded show, so we make a big deal out of people in the crowd who fund us. And Eugenio with a $20 super sticker. Thank you, Eugenio. Wow. Appreciate you being here and appreciate you supporting us in our struggle. It is a struggle. The struggle is real, friends. It is real. Noe Marie Clarity.
Big shout out.
Pat Thurston was an extra on 13 Reasons Why.
Actually, she had a speaking role. She played the judge in that.
Wow. That's very cool. I need to get in touch with her because she said she'd come on, and I just need to work out exactly when. Yeah. I remember...
you have also been more than an extra and had a lot of speaking roles.
Kim, I like to spend time with the extras because people don't speak to them on a set.
Yeah.
They're kind of off in their own little under a tent. It could be windy and cold. They have them in some like horrible. I've known this from being on a few sets. It's like the extras are really not treated well. They're not treated horribly, but they're not treated, I think, as well as probably they would like to. But I would also say that there's some horror stories about extras. Like one of them is one I may have told on this show before. I definitely think I told on the radio, is the one that came out of Titanic. When Titanic is sunk, now everybody's in the water. Those are all extras, right, that are in that water with Leo and, is it Kate Winslet?
Mm-hmm.
And when they break for lunch, these extras have already been in this water. It was in Mexico or something, I think. They've already been in the water for a long time, maybe a couple hours. and they're floating on these things that look like pieces of the boat, but they're actually, styrofoam kind of thing. Anyway, Cameron was asked, what should we do with the extras? Because if we take them out, we're going to have to send boats around to each one of them. And, for lunch, it will take a while to get them all out. And that's going to cut into lunch. And that's going to mean that we're going to get back late. And he said, just drop off the lunch there on their, they can eat them right there on the styrofoam things in the water. That's how bad an extra's life can be. All right. That would
that
suck.
sucks.
Yeah. Right. I got seawater in my tuna fish sandwich or whatever it is. It's, yeah.
Did
David,
you see?
what's that? Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead. My part.
No, I was just looking. I'm looking at comments. One of the fun things is looking at comments. We read all your comments. I read your post-show comments and try to respond whenever I can. Definitely, it all gets in. So thank you for being part of things and for commenting and interacting with videos even after the fact. Like not even the live show, but on the various videos that we drop. We do appreciate it. All right, so
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was a busy day in Trump land on Saturday, the day after that throwdown in the Oval, and then an even busier day on Sunday. So the weekend really was quite the period during which public officials, Republicans, oftentimes those who had been staunch defenders of Ukraine, like Marco Rubio, by the way, have found a new North Star. And that North Star is the reflexive utterances of our president, Donald Trump. Now, what happened in the Oval Office certainly was disastrous. And on some level, it did seem as though they were looking to get that disaster to happen. They'd sort of come in, the jury of Trump and Vance, who's never behind Ukraine. They had come in on Zelensky with a guilty verdict, and they just wanted to get to, it seems this is a defensible argument anyway, they wanted to get to the place where Zelensky looked like a bad guy, or at least where it looked like such a mess that you couldn't do business with them. And so this meeting in the White House, as you know, was supercharged really by J.D. Vance. He's the one who began to stir the pot. And then Zelensky, who, needs something from this country, was in this awkward position of having to take all of these insults that were being hurled at him, being accused of not being grateful enough, not saying thank you. As we told you last week, and as you can see from the video, he was all gracious and all thank yous at the beginning. So anyway, this has been from a policy standpoint, it's been a disaster, because you're seeing now a real discussion of what's going to happen with the NATO alliance. Yeah. It seems clear that the NATO alliance can't survive this kind of, I don't know, to call it a rapprochement is like, is to give it a positive spin. I'd say this sort of backdoor alliance with Vladimir Putin, which has always existed with Donald Trump, now seems to be less backdoor and more front door. And because of that, I'd say I don't understand how, we'll discuss it this week, and we're going to touch on it with Timothy Snyder in the next hour. I don't see how the NATO alliance survives this. I just don't see it. Now, the leadership in the UK has been the most aggressive about reaching out to Zelensky, and Zelensky really did go to the UK right away afterward. And I don't know if you saw, but I think the king had him at the personal residence, met with him not at Buckingham Palace. That was a message, in effect. And in so doing, Zelensky from Europe is getting the sense that he has friends there and he has backup. He's not getting that sense from America. And it does look like the UK is leading the effort to support Ukraine, to support the Ukraine effort militarily, meaning and this has all been left very vague, but meaning we will send money, and then they've said we will send boots on the ground. But when asked about that, the prime minister said, well, I'm talking about as a peacekeeping force. But it's so interesting to see what's happened with the disposition of this country toward this war effort. It always seemed so clearly to be a proxy war, right? And yet what we're seeing now is a complete pulling of the plug. Of course, we're seeing an about face in so many different ways in the American government that, it can be dizzying. But the co-president, Elon Musk, he said that he thinks it's time for the U.S. to exit NATO and the UN. He posted on his social media platform in a response to a right-wing political commentator saying it's time for the U.S. to leave NATO and the UN. He said, I agree. And there is a bill that has been submitted by several Republican lawmakers suggesting an exit from the UN, not yet from NATO. Nothing formal has been proposed. But this is so odd because the position of this country has changed so radically, as I say, and even some of the key figures associated with this. Can we play the Marco Rubio? This is Marco Rubio on the floor of the Senate. And he's explaining how the USA promised. Go ahead. What's that, Kim? Sorry.
When we play the video, can you drop out and then add back in because your audio is cutting a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. This is Marco Rubio as he talks about the connection the U.S. has to Ukraine.
When the Soviet Union fell in the early 1990s, Ukraine was left with the world's third largest stockpile of tactical nuclear weapons and strategic nuclear weapons on the planet. But they signed this agreement with the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia that basically said, if you give up your nuclear weapons, we, these three countries that signed to this, will provide for your defense and assure you of your defense. And so Ukraine did that. They gave up these weapons. Well, now, this was signed in 1994, 20 years later, one of the three countries that signed that agreement hasn't just not provided for their defense, they actually invaded them. And I want to make a point on this for a second. Think about if you're one of these other countries around the world right now that feels threatened by your neighbors. And the United States and the rest of the world are going to you and saying, listen, don't develop nuclear weapons. Don't develop nuclear weapons, South Korea. Don't develop nuclear weapons, Japan. Don't develop nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia. We will protect you. We will watch out for you. What kind of lesson do you think this instance sends to them? I think the message this is sending to many nations around the world is perhaps we can no longer count on the security promises made by the free world. Perhaps we need to start looking out for ourselves. And that's why the Ukrainian situation is so much more important than simply what's happening in Europe. This has implications around the world.
How he's changed his tune, huh?
Right, exactly. It's a remarkable thing that he's now having to peddle the policy, I'll call it with a small p, because it is not well thought out by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Now, Musk has a plan that it involves power worldwide. He's involved in elections in Europe, and he's involved in the elections here, and he's involved in reshaping the American government. Never should this guy have been permitted this kind of power, but he's met the perfect guy for his agenda, right? Because Donald Trump essentially wants to play golf, talk smack about leaders who he knows aren't powerful now enough to really hit back. I mean, Zelensky needs our help, so he has to kind of just take it. It was sort of remarkable that he was able to push back at all, but you saw him taking on water. And so Musk is there to reshape so many policies in government, and I'd even suggest in foreign policy. Trump is really kind of asleep at the switch. I understand he seems engaged when, we see him in these various signing photo ops where he's being told what this stuff is. I'm not saying he's not all there mentally, although he may or may not be. I don't know. What I'm saying is he's not engaged with a sense of enthusiasm about reshaping policy. There's something with Putin. He envies Putin. Putin may have something on it. It might be like full-on compromise, or it might be business opportunities. I mean, Trump is easily bought. He's easily swayed, and particularly easily swayed if you're a powerful figure, as Putin is. I mean, what Trump doesn't realize is America is way more powerful than Russia. It's not even close. They have an economy that is struggling at best. They are hobbled by this Ukraine war. Russia needs you, Donald Trump, but you don't realize it. You don't realize all the leverage you have. And it's sad because now you're going to turn your back on Ukraine and really open the door for a Russian dominance in much of Europe. So the European allies are trying to get something together, essentially a plan, so that as America steps back, they are there to form a coalition without America. But I don't know how Ukraine holds off the Russians, even as diminished as the Russian military has been by this war. I mean, both parties to this war, Ukraine and Russia, have become horribly bloodied by what's happened. They really do both want it to end. But that said, I don't know how you hold off the Russians without the Americans' help. I just don't see it. But we'll talk to Timothy Snyder a little bit about this in the next hour as well. The other thing that happened over the weekend related to policy and related to Elon Musk, the co-president, this is what I mean when I say that, you know, Trump has really turned over the keys to the governmental car to Elon Musk to drive it wherever he wants. He's now got his eyes on Social Security. Mm-hmm. And I've told you the game here. It's to privatize everything, okay? The Eric Prince mercenary army part is going to start doing stuff. They are going to privatize the post office. They've been wanting to do this for a long time, the GOP. But this is a crew that is supercharged to privatize everything. And now they have their mandate, and you can see they're unstoppable. So, Social Security, I mean, the third rail of American politics. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to say they want to touch it. Well, Elon Musk calls it the greatest Ponzi scheme in history. He calls the government a Ponzi scheme. He was, of course, sitting in with his pal, Joe Rogan. Here's a look.
I mean, the government's one big pyramid scheme, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, you can tell me better than anybody.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
Right, explain that.
Oh, so, well, people pay into Social Security, and the money goes out of Social Security immediately, but the obligation for Social Security is your entire retirement career. So you're paying with you're paying like if you look at the future obligations of Social Security, it far exceeds the tax revenue. Far. Have you ever looked at the debt clock?
Yes.
Okay. There's our present day debt, but then there's our future obligations. So when you look at the future obligations of Social Security, the actual national debt is like double what people think it is because of the future obligations. So basically people are living way longer than expected. And there are fewer babies being born. So you have more people who are retired and that live for a long time and get retirement payments. So the future obligations. So however bad the financial situation is right now for the federal government, it will be much worse in the future.
Yeah, that's why things have to be handled responsibly. But I'll always just mention to you the Social Security tax. First of all, it's regressive, okay? The way the Social Security tax system is set up is if you don't make more than the $176,000 cap, then you're being taxed more than those people who do make $400,000, let's say, right? Because they're in the clear between 176 and 400,000, and so on. And if you make more than 400,000, you're even more in the clear. And you may say to yourself, well, Mark, if you're making that much money, I mean, you're already in the clear. Yeah, but the point is that the Social Security cap, the limit, should be raised. It's simple. It's just like there should be a tax on billionaires that could bail the U.S. out of so many situations, debt situations, that require some bailout. And it doesn't have to be done in some kind of one fell swoop. If you simply raised the Social Security cap so that it got up to, let's say, 400K, you could completely reverse these issues he's talking about. The reason that Social Security doesn't pencil out, if it doesn't, and there are other changes you can make as well, but this is like the easy one you could make. The reason it doesn't pencil out is because of this regressive tax. So that guy making $80,000 a year, he's paying way more in terms of the percentage of his income than is the guy making $400,000. It shouldn't be that way. So that's the crime of Social Security, in my judgment. It's not a Ponzi scheme. It's a forced retirement scheme.
Do you know how many people rely on this? How many seniors would be homeless? I don't see a way that we can get rid of Social Security if that's what he's assuming.
Well, they'll offer you a better Social Security, is what they're going to, Social Security 2.0 or whatever they're going to call it. And they'll design a system that will be privately run, and it will handle your forced retirement account for you. George Bush tried to do this. The younger George Bush tried to do it. He wanted, and this is the argument, this is like one of the ways in which they make the argument. Don't you think you deserve to have control over the monies you put aside over the years? Don't you think you should be able to handle your Social Security account? Don't you think you should be able to invest it and turn it into something even greater? So they pitched that. That was the pitch with the younger George Bush. And of course, that's ludicrous. I mean, A, you need the fund to pay out those who have reached the age at which they can draw on the fund. But B, do you really want everybody playing with their Social Security account and throwing it into crap like crypto, or throwing it into some penny stock that they heard about, or some stock that Joe Rogan told them about? I mean, what'll happen is, for all I know, they'll invest everything in one stock that goes completely south. Now they're busted out. They've reached Social Security retirement age, and there's no money in their account. I think the notion of Social Security is fairly well developed, but I think the one thing that they have really missed is that you need to raise that cap. It's that simple. If they raise the cap or eliminate the cap on Medicare, we should have Medicare for all. I don't disagree with that. Carl says that. I don't disagree with that. I mean, of course, there should be, this is a broken healthcare system as well. And again, a lot of these things can be addressed by additional taxes on those who are essentially untaxed. You understand, the billionaires, and apparently we're making more billionaires now than ever in our history. I mean, even adjusted for inflation, we're making more. The billionaires pay almost no tax compared to us. Almost nothing. I mean, this is a crew that has benefited enormously from tax breaks all along the way, from subsidies in the case of Elon Musk. His billions in his companies, SpaceX, Tesla, etc., they were propped up by you and me. You must get that we create the environment by which they can exploit it and achieve great successes. I also want to say that I have mad respect for them and oftentimes the revolutionary ways in which they've created businesses here. For that, they gain the billions they've made. But they should pay something back into the system, is all I'm saying. So on Social Security, which is Musk's latest thing, I think the fix is simple. And I don't think this is the last you've heard of it. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Louis says Elon's algorithm has determined people are living too long and messing everything up. Solution, RFK and Dr. Oz equals guaranteed to regress life expectancy. Yeah, it's pretty well. Thank you, Luis, for that. He's an OG of our show.
No vaccines. We'll take care of that life expectancy problem for you.
Well, the other about face, I'm going to get to Gary Dietrich here in a second. He can put a lot of this in order, and we'll get to Gavin Newsom and what he's up to. But the other about face that we saw this weekend, and we saw the about face, right? We've had it on Ukraine. Now Russia's our pal, and we're all about, our favorite authoritarian, Vladimir Putin. But the other about face was the RFK Jr. about face. First, it was this huge outbreak of measles in Texas, and then the outbreak of measles in New Jersey. These among communities that are anti-vax communities, okay? So they are road testing the anti-vax proposition in these communities, and it's not working out so well. So the about face was that RFK Jr. said, hey, no big deal. Measles happens every year. Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. And now he's saying, wait a minute, I've always been for the measles vaccine. And so he's all over the place. I will have to see where the CDC and NIH, where he shut down funding and a bunch of important programs. One was involved in Alzheimer's, the other was involved in cancer research. We'll have to see where all of this ends up. But I would say that RFK Jr. has got to find God on this because it's costing people their lives. So.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This guy is super smart when it comes to politics. Gary Dietrich is really amazing. He's our former KGO colleague, and he has reported across the CBS television stations on California politics and beyond, and on iHeart Radio. He is their political analyst. He joins us on Mondays. How about it for the great Gary Dietrich, everybody? Hi, Gary.
Hey, Mark.
Listen, I want to start with, I'll get to Ukraine and all, and where we are from foreign policy standpoint. I'll get to that. But I want to start to exploit a real expertise of yours because you are there in Sacramento and you're seeing it all. And Gavin Newsom, who, many kind of look at him as maybe the future of the Democratic Party on some level. I mean, he speaks very well. He understands the issues very well. He has the same hypocrisy as all the other politicians. But he's now doing something that kind of involves reaching out. And I wonder if you can get into a little bit. He's kind of embraced the new media.
Well, I think the hard lesson for Democrats last fall, one of the hardest of all, was the nature of the new media. Every few election cycles now, Mark, something new, mainly revolving around the evolution of technology, has transformed campaigns. It started, by the way, with contributions, when famously Howard Dean started raising tens of millions of dollars online in these tiny contributions. Then Bernie Sanders perfected that and raised remarkable amounts of money through little tiny contributions. Obama did the same thing, took it to another level. And so that was on the contribution side. But then on the messaging, the communication side, one of the biggest self-recriminations that Democrats have been looking at in terms of their $1 billion raised by the Biden/Harris campaign, but where that money went was the amazing reach of podcasts. Most famously, of course, the Joe Rogan 3-hour Donald Trump podcast that got over 100 million views. And of course, Kamala Harris famously did not go on that podcast. So what has Gavin Newsom done? Last week announced he is starting a new podcast called This is Gavin Newsom. Now, why I think this is significant, not only, of course, does it immediately signal to people that 28 is just around the corner for him in terms of his attention, but also I think interesting is the way he's going to do this, Mark. And I think this is going to raise a lot of hackles even in his own party, because he says he's going to be very heavy on guests, not just Gavin. And a lot of these guests he announced last week are going to be MAGA people. And they said, well, who are you talking about? He said, well, look at the lineup of CPAC this week. So he plans to do kind of double down what he did with Ron DeSantis, remember, on Fox News when they had that famous debate between the two of them. And he plans to bring on not only key Democrats to sort of do a big, giant introspection on where we go from here, but bring on Republicans, as he says, take them on, but have a respectful dialogue. So we'll see how this plays. But it's a pretty gutsy move when you think about it, for a Democrat to say, I'm going to bring on and give high profile opportunities for my major political opponents.
Yeah, you're right. It is. And I think Newsom has got the chops to pretty much argue with anybody on the merits. I mean, he's very good in the debate. And so if he had a conversation maybe with, a Charlie Sykes or whomever, it might be something that would be great to listen to, and it might be elucidating. I mean, you might learn something. I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's such a bad idea. And as you say, it sort of reflects the inadequacies of this last campaign, at least in the general. I mean, that they really didn't lean in aggressively enough to new media. I love that you mention how the Democrats spent money, because they had so much money, and I thought they were wasting it. And I was astounded at how effectively the GOP put the Musk money and all the other fundraising that they had. They have deep pockets there on the GOP side as well. They put that into some really well-crafted, we talked about them before, television campaigns and TV media buys, but they also played, of course, the new media. I just felt that when you actually saw the breakdown the New York Times did on how the Democrats spent money, putting concerts and appearance fees for, Beyonce, et cetera, what a waste. I mean, it's an absolute waste, man. We're not putting on the best concert. We're trying to turn out voters.
Right. Right. And I think what's going to be interesting is not only does this sort of open up, I think, the new media to the Democrats, which they knew they needed to do, but there is the Democrats themselves are saying, who is the voice of our party, right? I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges in the next 21 months, is crafting a set of messages and getting some voices out there for the midterms. If the Democrats want to, as I think I mentioned last week, the lowest hanging fruit is to get a half a dozen seats in the House and then take back control of the fund development strategy, which is basically budgeting has to start in the House of Representatives. If you want to get control of that, the biggest lever of power, which is federal budgeting, you've got to get control of the House. And so I think Newsom's going to be one of those voices. He's clearly positioning himself that way. And you just have to ask, who else is out there? I mean, Obama and Clinton showed themselves not to be the kind of sort of powerful voices that I think Democrats hoped they would be. Chuck Schumer is kind of getting ready to move into the limelight. Out of the limelight, I should say. And of course, Nancy Pelosi has really stepped out of it. So they're looking for new voices. Maybe this is going to be it.
I'm going to leave Newsom and get to sort of national, international politics in a second. But just because we're mentioning Newsom, and California has been through so much with the wildfires, et cetera, and the build back is going to be a huge, difficult climb. And even as they're building back, we're learning about what happened with LAFD, the fire department in Southern California, et cetera. So leaving aside those issues that are associated with blame, now we're just talking about building back. Newsom is saying, hey, we're going to fast track a lot of this build back. So that I know you guys are looking at decades, but we don't think it'll be that long necessarily.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit last week about the spotlight of the Olympics coming in 3.5 years to LA, and how, LA is going to be under a microscope, and therefore politics are right before the 28th presidential campaign. I don't think it's an accident. The Newsom already has waived a lot of CEQA, that is California Environmental Quality Act requirements, as well as Coastal Commission build back requirements. And now he stretched that just 2 days ago, Mark, into the prevention side. So in the prevention space, he said, we are going to waive CEQA and the Coastal Prevention Act for things like vegetation and tree removal, building buffer zones, which basically means devegetating strips of land in heavily forested or vegetated areas to help with fire suppression. And also, in terms of just the basics of what we call fire prevention fires, right? I mean, they have fires that they set intentionally in order to reduce undergrowth. And those have been really restricted by environmental regulations. So this is going to make a lot of people in the environmental community unhappy. His edicts over the weekend, his executive actions, but he's also going to Congress in Washington asking for $40 billion for the build back in LA. And in order to do that, it's clear there's going to have to be some changes in California policies. The feds have already said so. And so here we go.
Yeah, they want to see some movement. in California in terms of the way things are done and how the Build Back goes down. So that same government that wants all of the want us to show our math in California about how we're going to build back after these horrible fires, devastating fires, that same government is ready to pull the plug on Ukraine. Now we are pivoting toward Russia, it would seem. I mean, I'm kind of rounding it off and softening it up. I mean, it's a hard turn that he's made to Putin. Can you put this in some context for us?
Yeah, I'll tell you, here's what I think is going to be the most significant part of this. I mean, the dust up between Zelensky and Trump, I mean, I think all of us watched that in shock. I tell you, it's amazing to me, Mark, the change in the political appetite of the average person. I literally was trying to sneak in a workout Friday afternoon when my phone blew up, of course, and I had to run into CBS for our evening shows. But watching a middle-aged woman I'm just trying to do my warm down after weights, and there's a point to this story. And she's sitting in the jacuzzi in my gym, with the co-ed jacuzzi, with that on her phone. Now, that is unprecedented stuff, right? I mean, just sitting there in the gym watching this whole thing go down. People are engaged as I have never seen them in this. That's just sort of on the personal American level. Now, on the strategic international level, that rare minerals deal is going to get signed. I have no doubt it's probably going to happen, through back channels. It will be far less glitzy than what we saw on Friday. But I think that rare earth minerals deal is going to happen between Ukraine and U.S. That will be a good thing for both sides eventually. But to me, the most significant thing out of the weekend is what's happening in Europe. And that was the Sunday conclave in London with all the European leaders and Zelensky, and Macron calling for the first time basically what was sort of a Trumpian call, but Macron saying, we've got to get the 3% GDP of our budgets for European defense. I mean, I think Europe at this juncture, this to me is the tipping point. What happened in Friday in Washington and what happened yesterday in London with the European leaders. I think Europe has decided, you know what? We've got to take on Ukraine as Europe. And we've also got to put together a stronger European defense that starts with each one of us committing to 3% of GDP and then bringing that together to create, I don't think we're anywhere close to a European defense force. Some are asking for that, but certainly a much more coordinated, much more robust, much more muscular European defense than we have seen perhaps ever in our lifetimes.
Yeah, they put their money where their mouth is on this, and a considerable amount of money at that. If America de facto pulls out of NATO, and I say de facto because it feels as though right now, I don't know that America would ride to the rescue of a NATO nation, another NATO nation that was involved in some confrontation with Russia, for example. I mean, it seems like, but I mean, that might be a big stretch. Please, stay with me. I just see our disposition toward NATO being one of, arms crossed and, work it out yourselves.
Well, I do think, I'm glad you qualified that, Mark, because I truly don't think that, for example, if one of the other bordering countries, including the new ones, Finland, Sweden, others, Poland, if those were attacked by Russia, I don't think that U.S. would just sit back on that. I don't think that's the case. But I think more significantly is that I think the nature of the NATO defense structure, in other words, I think NATO has always been primarily U.S. led. Despite the fact that almost all the nations are on the other side of the Atlantic, with the exception of us, right? And you've also got Canada that figures into that. But most of it's been European, based on European soil. I think the change is going to be this, and it's what I was kind of referring to about what came out of London yesterday. I think it's going to be more European led. I think there's going to be greater investment by European countries. I certainly think that Britain, France, and then to a little bit lesser degree, Germany are going to be the leaders of it. And they are going to, basically rally the troops, so to speak, and sort of pun intended in Europe and say, okay, we're going to take the lead on NATO with the U.S. sort of, and you've been hearing this the last few weeks, sort of taking a a sort of backstop role, Well, listen, we're behind you guys, but we're not going to be out in front. It needs to be you. And then we will certainly be there if needed, but in a more secondary role. I think right now, at least, that is what looks like is trending.
A depressed Canadian says to you, Ukraine giving up its mineral wealth will not be good for both sides. No security guarantees. It's being extorted. The only one who benefits are Trump's Russian backers. It is true that the one sticking point, and it seemed to be a sticking point in that conversation that I couldn't believe they were having, in front of the cameras about, specifics in this deal, is the security guarantee. That's really the only inducement I would think that that Zelensky has to make this deal.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Well, it's also to keep in the good graces of, billions of dollars that they'd still like to continue to receive, both in terms of military and economic aid. But I think the security piece of it is clearly NATO's going to figure into that, as we just talked about. I think the U.S. will figure into it. But it's not just American military security guarantees. As I referenced last week on the show, Mark, it's also just a presence of Western companies in there helping or either conducting or assisting with or partnering in the mining, the transportation of those minerals. Why is that significant? Because when you put economic assets in a foreign country, you want to protect those, right? I mean that's sort of by definition. You don't want the investment, the capital investment, and then Putin's going to take those away. So the security guarantees are both direct in terms of American military might and American military aid, but it's also indirect in terms of protecting economic assets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, in fact, it speaks to the integral nature of those economic assets. Exactly. Silicon Valley Block says, I feel completely sober listening to Dietrich, even though I'm not. You do have a way of kind of chilling us out a little bit, even as the madness of Washington continues to get madder. This is interesting. Kick us out of NATO and let Ukraine in. I mean, the reality is, though, thank you, Phineas, for that. America is critical to NATO. NATO is what it is because of the United States of America.
Oh, well, the U.S. is, I really don't think the U.S. is going to back out of NATO. I think that would be, I think there's enough people, even in the current Trump administration, who believe we need to have a strategic role. And frankly, a guy like a Marco Rubio really believes that, for the simple reason that we, in his view, we need to stand shoulder to shoulder with Europe, shoulder to shoulder with NATO, in order to block a Sino-Soviet, as they used to call it in the past, but now it's Russian-Chinese, move geopolitically. I think that's the larger strategic. I don't like to use the word play in a any kind of a derogatory or diminutive way, but the larger geopolitical objective in this is to prevent a Chinese-Russian attempt to begin to take over the world stage. I mean, there's just no getting around that. That's the larger. That is the lens through which people like Rubio and people on the Democratic side too, by the way. It's not just Republicans. People in those Senate Foreign Relations committees believe that also as well.
No one will invest without a security guarantee, says Sports Hatch. Yeah, and this is back on the Newsom stuff. Rule of thumb, says CC Ryder, only give your enemy a platform if you have diligently prepared effective counter attempts to counter arguments to kneecap their lies and propaganda. No counter allows the lies to sell. It's dangerous, she says.
Well, I think there is a realization. Let's just take California as a sort of test case of where we're at, and you can ascribe it to climate change. You can put whatever you want to say, but the reality is, you look at the last half dozen years in California, the devastating fire in Northern California in Paradise. Okay, then you go to the Caldor fire up in the Lake Tahoe area that almost completely came a hair's breadth away from consuming all of South Lake Tahoe. Okay. Then you, of course, go now to most recently LA. These are all marked just in the last 6 years. Okay. And they are tens of billions of dollars of damage. What I'm getting at is California and the West has to find different strategies. There's got to be more money invested on the prevention side as well as on the suppression side, because you just cannot absorb these kind of economic as well as human cost body blows. I mean, those deadly fire in California's history up in Paradise, right? The most economically devastating in LA just months ago. You can't do these every couple of years, right? I mean, it's just not possible to absorb those, and nobody wants to. And then you pile on top of that the California homeowners insurance crisis, which is just right now beginning to fully blossom, rate increases of 20 to 30% in a year. I mean, you can't, this is not sustainable over the long term. So I think Newsom is saying, okay, look, we're going to have to do some things differently. And if it means looking at some of our environmental regulations or whatever differently, I think that's what he's currently experimenting with politically.
Yeah, that's a really great summary of the predicament that California finds itself in. And by the way, it's instructive for other parts of the country. Florida finds itself in the same predicament, and even parts of the coastal eastern portions of this nation find themselves in the same predicament, and the Gulf states beyond just Florida. So, yeah, California is maybe the tip of the spear, but there is definitely a lot more going on here. I also think that, just to wrap up, it might be quite listenable to hear Newsom talk about some of these things to which you've referred. You know, I mean, I think these are issues that Californians want to hear about. And sometimes in a longer format, you can sense the disposition of a leader toward certain things, or a politician, or, you know, a legislator toward certain things that you don't get in a statement from the governor's office. You know what I mean?
No, I think you're exactly right, Mark. And, you know, beyond the politics of it, I mean, people either love or hate Newsom, just like they do most state and national politicians. Some are going to see this as nothing more than a crass political move for 28. But I look at it as sort of you're implying, Mark, potentially an opportunity. How many places outside of, I mean, even inside Washington, sadly now, do you get both sides together to just say it, debate an issue, right? I mean, you got the echo chambers on either side. You got Fox News and MSNBC, and I'm not sure exactly where CNN ends up sometimes these days. And the other, I mean, where is it happening? You know, despite Joe Rogan getting one person sitting down, you know what I'd like to suggest to Rogan? You know, do more of the crosstalk thing, right? Get both sides and sit them down in front of you for a couple hours. Let's see where that goes. I frankly think we need more of that.
Yeah. I think that's very well put. You can find Gary across the CBS television stations in California and beyond, and also across the radio and media reach of iHeart Media. He is the political analyst for both. We love talking to you, pal. You do chill us out somehow. I don't know. I feel like... you talk me off the ledge every week, so thank you for that.
Okay, well,
we'll see you next time, bud. Thank you. All right, Gary Dietrich, everybody. He is good. And Gary Dietrich, of course, is brought to us by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, he's your man. In Northern California, you need a highly respected real estate professional. Bill Campbell of Remax Gold is the guy. Call or text Bill 530-448-7474. Again, 530-448-7474. Tell him you heard about it on the show, and he'll get you squared away. He can look at stuff with you, can praise for you. He does it all. Remax Gold and Bill Campbell. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, we've done a lot here already, and some of the best stuff we're going to do is still minutes away. I just wanted to check on comments if I can. Eugenio de Arnal says, Mark, it's time to impeach Trump and Vance and investigate Musk for his extradition on the grounds of treason. Well, it may be time for those things, but we don't have the legislators in place to even impeach him and do an investigation. You understand? In this country, sadly, impeachment is, or maybe proudly, impeachment is the investigative presentation of a case, and then the Senate votes on removal. And we have, as the opposition, if you want to think of us that way, I'm not a registered Democrat, but just to, it really is basically a two-party system, as you're aware. Democrats need many more than they have to execute on Eugenio's plan.
With that point, I saw this too. Colin says, can you please ask what the Democrats are doing to safeguard the midterms? So you talk about Democrats not having enough support where they need it. What's to say that we ever will again. They ever will again.
Well, I very much worry about this, Colin. I very much think that the elections are being, I guess I'll use the word manipulated. I'm going to use the word affected, because I think manipulated suggests something that is happening, maybe, and that is manipulating results. Like when you are the counter, you can influence the count. So there may be a part of that. There's unquestionably voter suppression on a level we have never seen before. And we've had Greg Palast on a few times, and he's talked about it and demonstrated the ways in which it is happening. And there's also just a lot of disinformation. But in terms of safeguarding the election, I'm concerned with making the election secure, safe, and making the count real, right? And what are Democrats doing? That is a separate conversation that we will have. In fact, I'll book a guest for you who is an expert in such things. But you do see the marriage of technology and operations, meaning how many polling places there are, where they exist, how many mail-in ballots there are, what states do those exist in, and to what extent do you have mail drop-off ballots in various drop-off locations? Where do those exist? So these are all things that can help, and I will use then manipulate the number of votes you'll get in. And then, of course, there's a different kind of manipulation once the votes have come in. So long answer that didn't really tell you anything, maybe, but just to say there are all of these different facets to this question, and we will address them on this show in the weeks ahead, I promise.
Matt had a graphic up that something caught my eye in the graphic. It was Democrats, and I guess the words associated with Democrats on one side and Republicans and the words associated with that on the other side. And on the Republican side, it said hard Jesus. And I just don't know what that means. I mean, I don't want to think about hard Jesus, or do I? I don't know the answer. There it is.
Hard Jesus.
Hard Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you don't know what hard Jesus is, Kim, then again, I question your patriotism. I mean, it's.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
I'm just saying.
I mean, are we going at Jesus hard, like with hard focus on religion?
You can't go to Jesus hard enough.
Jesus hard.
Yeah, you got to. All right. Cheers, everyone. I mean, I need a quick cup of coffee.
Yeah.
This is our. We could try ignoring it, sir. It is it's one of our mugs. They have sayings, all the mugs do, from the show. So you see the logo on one side, and then this particular one has this. We could try ignoring it, sir. We could try ignoring it, sir. Yeah, I really do love this one. Although chit is my really, I have a cupboard stuff. Full of chit. Vilma wrote in. Hold on, Vilma. That is Coachella Valley coffee, by the way. I go for the Ocotillo espresso, but you should go for whatever you like. They're tasting notes about all of it. It is a boutique coffee roastery, and you can find it at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And when you go there, and again, because this is, high-end coffee, it's rich, delicious, robust experience. When you go there, you should please use our discount code. The discount code is
Mark
T. 10% off. And you get anything on the site. You can get coffee, tea, merch, whatever they have, you get 10% off if you use the discount code Mark T. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I suggest it. I don't want to say it's going to change your life.
Oh, I'll say it's changed my life.
It has changed my mornings. I'll tell you that. Cheers, everyone. We could try ignoring it, sir. There you go. I am now to Vilma. Sorry. What was the comment from Vilma? And then I've got Timothy Snyder. Vilma, this past election was the perfect storm to destroy democracy. Republicans run all the checks and balances. Yeah, I thank you, Vilma, for that. Vilma is one of our OGs with us from the very beginning. I can't disagree. I mean, and sadly, I think the next election will be even more troubled from that standpoint. I mean, Carl, thank you for the $2 super sticker. Love that. Big shout out to you.
Big shout out.
I am I'm troubled by it, but I think all we can do is report it, and all we can do is sort of watch some of these levers and pulleys that they use to maybe influence the election. All we can do is watch it, report on it, shed light on it, and protest it, push back against it. And I really think that's the only way you get back a free and fair voting system. So, all right. Where am I time-wise? I feel like I have to. Do I have time for Kim to do some news before Timothy Snyder, or should we get right to Timothy Snyder? Timothy Snyder is a brilliant. Most of you must know Timothy Snyder. He's a brilliant public intellectual. He's a brilliant professor out of Yale. He is a prolific author, and he's written books about Ukraine. He has a particular historical expertise in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, in Russia. So he's a remarkable source. I guess we'll run it now. We can run Kim's news after, and I'd say run it because we were able to book him, but he couldn't make the live show, so we spoke to him before the show started. But what I wanted to mention to you is this kind of stuff happens. So we talked to him right before, if you can imagine this. Now, I've got this expert on Ukraine and also on totalitarianism, on tyranny. He wrote a book called On Tyranny. And we get him right before the throwdown in the Oval Office. So you're going to hear a conversation about these things. And if you are wondering why I'm not asking about the throwdown in the Oval Office, that's the reason why. But he is a brilliant thinker. And as I say, a great person to be into the public space with takes on so much of what's going on. And again, the rise of tyranny. Could it happen? Has it happened in this country already? So without further delay, although we do like delaying, here he is, our conversation with Timothy Snyder.
What he's got going here
a warm
is
welcome
a
for the
situation.
great Timothy Snyder, please. Professor, welcome.
Glad to be with you.
You know, I was rereading On Tyranny, and man, it is scary. And then after reading On Tyranny, I went back and watched some of your YouTube annotations. These are oral annotations that you've done after having read, I think, parts of On Tyranny yourself. You go through the chapters and then you sort of orally annotate them. And it's chilling because you did that 3 years ago, I think, during the Biden administration. You were talking about J6 with a historian's view and perspective, and you put it in a context of a broader history. And now we see J6 in an even more perverted way, the way it's been an attempt to lionize it, to make these people who are associated with J6 heroes, victims of the state. I wonder, just because I've started there, if you can give me a sense of things now, because as I read your materials and heard your oral annotations, I just thought it's happened. The coup is complete.
I wrote On Tyranny way back in 2016, and you're kind to remember the things I was saying around January 2021. I agree with you. They're thinking of a different kind of regime. In January, the thing which concerned me the most about January 6th, or really the run up to January 6th, November, December 2020, was the big lie that saying that Trump won in 2020 is not just a falsehood. It's not just a misrepresentation. It opens up a portal basically into an alternative reality. And what I was concerned about back then was that once people enter that portal, they're not going to come back out, and it's going to change the way that our politics works. And I think it has. I think we're now in a world or in a country where, you can enforce the lie on people. You can demand that FBI agencies pass a loyalty test in which they accept that Trump actually won that election. And you do this knowing that it's not true. Like you do it knowing that you're bending not just reality, but people's minds, and that you're getting them used to a different kind of politics in which what is true is going to be what you say. And that, of course, is also connected to violence, because if you carry out acts of violence on the basis of a lie, as people did on January 6th, then that lie becomes true for you. And if you're living in a world of lies, you're going to be more apt to carry out acts of violence yourself, because you're going to be annoyed by the way the reality resists you. You're going to be annoyed by the way that other people aren't living inside your story. So we're in a very different place, where that lie of January 6th was one of the tools to take apart the normal kind of rule of law state that we've got now.
So this propaganda that was then, that masquerades as truth, is now, as you have alluded to, is the litmus test for FBI agents, for others who are going to take key positions in this administration, the Trump administration. The perniciousness of that disinformation, of that propaganda that is now then repeated through and amplified through the Fox News channels of the world, through right-wing media, and now through independent media, independent right-wing media. Does this, you've seen this, put it in a historical perspective, does this sound like what we've seen when we look back at history?
I think there's a basic difference between democracies and other kinds of systems when it comes to the truth. It's not like everybody always tells the truth in a democracy, but you have to accept that there is truth out there, that there are facts out there, and that the facts are the things that bring us together. So we have different interests, different values, but we have the same facts. And so then we can sometimes cooperate. We don't have to, but sometimes we can. But when there is no truth, then you're going to be in a different kind of system. If there's no truth, then that means that you and I, citizens, are not going to be able to cooperate, because on the basis of what? And if there's no truth, then we can't really resist tyranny, because on the basis of what? What are you going to say to the strong man if there's no truth, if nobody believes in facts? And historically in the 20th century, this can go broadly two ways. There's the fascist way, where what the strong man says is the truth. And it doesn't matter if it contradicts the world or if it contradicts himself, because the fact that he can push through the lie and make you deal with it is the sign that he is in control, right? And I think that's where we're closer. The other way is the Soviet way, the communist way, where you say there's one truth, and that one truth is the party line, and you've got to follow the party line. But either way, whether it's zero truths or one truth, you can't have democracy on that basis. Democracy requires there are millions of little truths, and we kind of find our way to each other, to one another, on the basis of those little truths.
And so when it comes to the truth and democracy and those things that are critical, I wonder about how the press plays in all of this. In some of your writings, you've alluded to the ways in which the press is an important part of local media. You've even, I think, lamented the fact that local media has vanished in large areas of America. There's just a news desert. And so I wonder if you can speak to where we are now as you look at the media environment in America.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mark. That's such an important point. I think that maybe the most important point is that if it's true that you need facts for democracy, then you have to generate them. You've got to create them. There have to be people who get paid to go out there and report. It has to be an honorable and a decent, but also a practically sustainable profession, the journalist. And we've basically chosen the last 15 years to make that not so. So now we live in a country where most counties in the United States of America don't have a reporter covering anything. And there are major beats which are not covered for most of the country, like the environment, for example. Most parts of the United States do not have somebody actually doing environmental reporting. And so just to make that really simple, like in most parts of the country, you just don't really have any way of knowing whether the water is polluted or not, or by what, or by whom. And the same goes for politics, right? Like if there's no local reporting, you don't know what's going on with the school board or the city council, and that's really more important than what's going on in Congress 9 times out of 10. But when you don't have local reporting, then all we care about is DC, and we get polarized, and the next step is we go online and we fall for conspiracy theories. So the local reporting is really the foundation of our republic, and the founding fathers actually understood this. And it's so for that reason, it's sad to watch it go. And it's dangerous to watch it go. Like, it's a pattern that we've seen before. Like in Russia, this happened first. In Russia, they lost local reporting, and then you have a few oligarchs, and then you have centralized media. And basically, we're going the same way. We're losing local media. We've got a few oligarchs. Their social media channels. It's getting more and more concentrated. So you have to have the belief in truth, but you also have to have the people who are out there creating the truth by doing their reporting. So you ask how we're doing. We're not doing very well. We don't have enough local newspapers. The ones that we do have, you see how the little ones who still exist are making a disproportionate difference. Like, for example, if you take the example of Musk and Trump and the cuts to federal agencies, they have a big propaganda story about that. It's about efficiency, they say. But if you have local reporters in the 50 states, they can tell you what these cuts actually mean to actual human beings. But if you don't have those local reporters, the propaganda story floats out there for much longer.
That's just such a great point. I've talked since these guys came to power, about how this waste, fraud, and inefficiency thing. Of course, we're all against waste, fraud, and inefficiency. And the idea somehow that, you can fly that flag and then just do whatever you want is, I think, the idea that's being played out. I mean, more and more, we're seeing in national reporting that there isn't fraud and inefficiency being prioritized. There's just cuts being prioritized. I don't even think you need any particular heavy lift on investigative reporting to realize that. I mean, it was just done so chaotically and haphazardly. But what you just said is critical, because I think most of us, all politics is local, and really it's like, how does it affect my life? And what you're saying is, without the local reporting, without those papers to tell you how it's affecting your life, you're not going to feel the effects on your life until it's too late. Go ahead, please.
No, and you're going to be trained to blame them on other people. I mean, I think you can kind of track the change of the Republican Party in this way, because it used to be that the Republican Party was a lot more responsive. I mean, they had, on the state level, the local level, mayors, city councils, whatever. But now that we don't have the local reporting, everything becomes about what the center tells you. And so there's not really local politics or state politics. It's all about winning and holding power, and about the issues that are defined by the president. And that's a very different kind of politics. And so then if something doesn't work, like your water is polluted, the school board's corrupt, you stop getting the support you used to get as a farmer, whatever, you've now been trained to blame the other side for it. Right? Like you're now in a different kind of politics, which is a politics of us and them, rather than the politics of local responsiveness.
You wrote about one-party rule, and one of the things you note in one-party rule, in other words, the evolution of a democratic system toward a singular party. You wrote, again, on tyranny about this. And I was struck by all of the aspects to this that I hadn't considered. One-party rule, just by definition, you go, well, that's awful. I mean, you don't have a plurality of opinion, you don't have a plurality of concerns, of issues, et cetera, that are all being expressed. You only have one party. But you described, and I wonder if you could just give us a few seconds on it, because I think, and in fear that we're sort of headed toward this incredible power that this one party will have over our country and its likely effects. Can you do two things for me? Can you comment on the one party rule aspects of perhaps tyrannical evolution, and then where we are today and how that fits in, if we're there, or how close we are?
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I mean, it is a feature of the kinds of tyrannical politics that we had in the 20th century that there was a single party. So even if the ideology was very different, so fascism versus communism, for example, in both of those systems, you have a single party. And what a single party allows you to do is to mediate between the leader and the people without the people really being represented. So you can be a member of the party, and being a member of the party can allow you to take part in the various patron-client relationships. It can allow you to have your little bit of corruption inside the overall party structure. It can allow you to feel like you're in and everybody else is out. But in a single party, what you can't really do is be represented, because you can't move out of the single party and vote for the other party, because there is no other party. The single party is it. it's like a tent, in which you can stay, but the air is very stifling, and there isn't that much that you can get for yourself in that tent. And you can't really advance in the tent, and you can't leave the tent. That's what a one-party state is like. So it may be better to be inside the tent than outside the tent. But at the end of the day, all you've got is a tent, and you've got the circus strongman, you've got a few clowns, but that's basically what you've got, and there's no way out of it. And it is really worrying in the US, because the problem with this kind of us and them politics that Trump and Musk and Vance propagate is that you're not treating the other side as a party which has a chance to win. You're treating them as the enemy, as the outsiders, as the people who have been destroying the country. And if you talk about them that way, then it's pretty easy to convince yourself and others that they don't really have the right to rule, that when they win the election, even when they win the elections, we shouldn't let them back into power. And if we go, one more election cycle like that, if we have an election where the Democrats win and are not allowed to take power or whatever it might be, then we're close to one-party rule. But answer the question more technically, gerrymandering is really problematic here, because you got a bunch of states like my home state of Ohio, which are pretty closely balanced, in fact, but where the local gerrymandering is so extreme that people are used to the idea that their state is a red state. And I just hate that notion, right? Like the state is painted a certain color and it never changes, like that circus tent, like it's just red on the outside. I really hate that idea that it's a red state, or a blue state for that matter, because that suggests that it can never change. It's just a thing that it is. And what I worry about is that people get used to one-party rule at the level of the state, and then they get used to it at the level of the federal government. And I think that's a process which has been going on for the last couple decades.
So the gerrymandering that you talk about, of course, is something that both parties engineer aggressively. The installation of party loyalists and of personal loyalists, that is to say, people who are now personally loyal to Donald Trump, seems to be the coin of the realm in Washington at the moment. And I'm wondering if there isn't a procession, in a sense, that is led by that toward this one-party rule, because the party in power in this instance has become so very loyal and resistant to any sort of outsider.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I mean, all these histories are different, and what's happened in the Republican Party in the U.S. is specific. It has become less locally responsive because of media. It's become used to one-party rule because of controlling the majority of the state houses. And then it has a specific charismatic leader who, of course, is very talented, whatever else you might want to say about him, but who is also frightening, at least to them. So the Republicans are more afraid of Trump than other people are. Republicans are most afraid, and then other Americans are less, and then foreigners least of all. And it's a funny kind of sequence, because people who are afraid of him at home think that others are more afraid of him, but actually others are less afraid of him. And of course, Russia and China not afraid of him in the least. So there's a funny kind of, there's a funny kind of spiritual exchange which goes on here, which is that when you decide you're going to submit to Trump, you think everybody's going to decide to submit to Trump, but that's actually not true at all. It's just you. But coming back from that little sidetrack, what Trump has done to Republicans is that he's purged the ones who might have had their own thoughts. So people have been primaried, or they've just chosen not to run because they're afraid of the stochastic violence which comes from his tweets. And so over time, over almost a decade now, he's shaped the Republican Party so that it's not so that it's a one-person party to a large extent. I mean, there are exceptions, there are honorable exceptions, but for the most part, it's a one-person party where the party is the person and the person is the party. And that has its own dangers, because you then have a party which doesn't know how to move on. You have a party which doesn't have a political imagination. You have a party which doesn't know what to do after Donald Trump, and therefore a party which might be tempted to think, well, maybe, after Donald Trump, more Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, that's exactly it. And that ripple effect of this single party rule and this loyalist foundation that government now is based upon is just that. I did want to double back with you, and I really, because I feel I want to exploit your expertise a bit in the world of Eastern Europe and Russia and everything that's happening in Ukraine. And I wonder if you can, for us in America, give us a historical perspective on Ukraine, and then explain perhaps, and I know this may be a challenge in the limited time we have, but just give us a moment then on how that historical context of Ukraine is served or undercut by what's happened now with this likely deal that's being brokered between Putin and Trump. It's astounding to me, but I wonder if you could put it in some kind of historical perspective and just explain again Ukraine's role in all of this in the modern era.
Mm-hmm. Well, historically, Ukraine is an extremely important bit of territory, which has been contested by powerful actors for a couple thousand years. Narrowly, historically, and this is the important part, for the last 30 years, 35 now or so, Ukraine has been an independent state, which has been a kind of gift to the idea of a world of rule of law or a world of, if you like, Western democracies, because it has meant that if Ukraine can be kept as a rule of law state, then the whole order of rule of law states is more likely to survive. So if this is an essential piece of the geography of the world, the way it goes tends to determine the way other things go. There's a reason why the Soviets were so keen to control it. There's a reason why the Nazis were so keen to control it. And I think those of us who like the rule of law and democracy have tended to underestimate how important it was that Ukraine actually became a rule of law state and became a democracy. And now that's threatened. And as it's threatened, not just the European order, but the world order and also the American place in that order is threatened. The Ukrainians have done something very special, which is that they've held off an attack by what was supposed to be the second largest army in the world, essentially by themselves, with modest, we have to be honest about this, modest contributions from other countries, including the US. Our contribution, even at the inflated numbers we like to use, is something like 0.15%, 0.15% of GDP. It's really it's a nickel on the Defense Department dollar. Even if we if we reckon it using our own inflated numbers, it's actually less than that. It's a penny on the overall budget. It's not really very significant. And for that price, the Ukrainians have managed to do something in the last 3 years, which I think is in fact quite historical, which is they've fulfilled the entire NATO mission. They've held off the army, which the entire NATO alliance, including the United States, was meant to hold off. They've showed China how hard it is to carry out offensive operations. They've made it much less likely that other countries will get nuclear weapons, because if Russia's nuclear bluff succeeds, everybody's going to build nuclear weapons. Right now, thanks to Ukraine, it's not succeeding. And they've held up this world order, which is based on the premise that countries are sovereign and borders are real. And as we enter 2025 in the fourth year of this war, it's been horrible for the Ukrainians. They've borne costs that most of the rest of us can't possibly understand. Americans have not been in a war like this since the Second World War. Casualties on a scale are something that we have not experienced since the Civil War. It's extraordinary costs that they've had to pay, and we have reaped the benefits from it. What we are risking doing now is tossing that all away on the basis of essentially as far as I can tell, just like selfishness, miscalculation, and a lack of awareness of all of this. I think what the Trump people are doing is making the U.S. much weaker by fighting with our allies, and then in the case of Ukraine, by in effect creating an exploitative relationship with a particular ally, which had done the most for us in the last 3 years. And they rationalize this in various ways, but I think it's pretty impossible to rationalize. I mean, the only coherent explanation is that the Trump people actually want a world order in which Russia and China are more significant, and which the United States is less significant, and in which the rules matter a lot less. Is
that based on some perverse understanding of the world and through kind of a Trumpian prism, or is that a simple business exploitation? I feel that there's a lot of motivation just in terms of dollars and cents for these guys.
Yeah. I think those two things are the same thing, because if you see the world in terms of transactions for Musk, that's not the same thing as seeing the world in terms of the interests of the American people. Those are two very different things. And so if you see the world in terms of transactions that are going to benefit Musk or somebody else, then you're entering into a world which is like the Russian world, where everything is about transactions for Putin, right? Or somebody else. And so sure, you can get into that world which is business transactions, but business transactions on behalf of oligarchs who already have hundreds of billions of dollars is not the same thing as the interests of Americans or the interests of Russians. And if you're Russia, that's a comfortable world because you're Putin and you're already in charge and that's the way you like things. But if you're America, you're tossing away not just your interests, but you're tossing away your power. because your power is built on the fact that people trust you, that you have alliances, that you're generally on the side of the law, and so on. So when you choose a Russian way of doing things, you may be benefiting 1 American, 2 Americans, 3 Americans who are already extraordinarily wealthy and don't need to be benefited. But you're, in exchange for that, you're letting slip away an entire world order, which was very beneficial for all Americans. So that's a very, very particular kind of trade.
In our last minute or two here, I am drawn to, even during your explanation, an America First kind of a sloganism that has taken over. Beyond the slogan now, it sort of becomes the default position as we talk about these things. So even as I hear you speak about the importance of America in sort of the balance, the fragile balance internationally, I think of how it's sold, how this policy is sold. Hey, America first. This isn't an American situation that benefits America, et cetera. However it's packaged, the America first message seems to be carrying the day. And so I think back to some of your writings where I learned really, and I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know this, that this was really a sloganism that Nazi Germany had, a Germany first. I mean, certainly I was aware of the propaganda machine around Nazi Germany and so much of what they did, but specifically, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I recall from some of your writings that they did have that very notion that it's Germany first.
Well, yeah, I mean, Deutschland über alles, but also more specifically, in the late 1930s, early 1940s, the United States, important Americans spoke of America first. And what they meant was actually what Trump means by it. What they meant was not that we care about Americans per se. What they meant by America first was isolation from the rest of the world, admiration of dictators. So the people who talked about America first in the late 30s, early 40s generally admired extreme right-wing dictators. And that's now repeating in the 2020s, where the people who talk about America first, what they really mean generally is we'd kind of like our country to be more like Russia. That's essentially what they mean. It's not, but the essential analytical point about America first is that when you're alone, you're not first. I mean, I think that's the confusion, right? When you're alone, you're not actually first. Like you don't win the race just because there's nobody else there. And this way of thinking about freedom, where we're free if we beat up on the Canadians, we beat up on the Mexicans, we beat up on the Danes. Beating up on the Canadians and the Danes is just about the craziest thing you can do. Those have been our most reliable allies. Beating up on the Ukrainians is just about the craziest thing you can do. They've delivered more for our national security in the last 3 years than any other partner. And what we're doing is not putting ourselves first. We're putting ourselves in a kind of isolated cellar. We're putting ourselves in isolation. And, when there's only one of you, that you're not first in any meaningful sense. You're just alone. And when you're alone, you lose a whole lot of the benefits, not just the pleasure, but also the interests, the strength, everything that you had when you weren't alone. I think the instinct that, Trump and Musk are appealing to is this American idea that you can do it on your own. But you can't do the world on your own. If you choose to do the world on your own, you just end up without friends, you end up without relationships. You're not first anymore. Like if you're running the race all by yourself, you don't finish first. You just look like an idiot. And that's kind of where we are. We're running the race all by ourselves, except we're not even really running a race. We're just talking about running a race and how great we are. So there you go.
The great con that Donald Trump, in my judgment, has perpetrated continues. And I think he's able to somehow, and we'll see, sell that con of this serving American interests in some way, or not being important. Maybe people feel as though it doesn't really affect me. Ukraine, I'm tired of sending money, however it's, again, packaged. It seems as though for the moment they have seized the propaganda day, and they make their points, the right does, or the Trump administration more specifically, because I don't even know if they are really representing the right, maybe the extreme right. They make their message most digestible still. I feel there'll come a point when that won't be the case. Isn't that right?
I mean, I think people watch this conversation later on and I'll see if we were right or wrong, but I think it is starting to fray around the edges a little bit. I think a lot of Americans, including a lot of folks who are conservative, generally regard Putin as a problem. I mean, the polling is actually overwhelming on this, that Americans don't believe that Putin can be trusted. And the polling is also pretty strong on supporting Ukraine. And the polling is also pretty strong on a lot of the domestic programs, which are now being taken apart. So I do think the propaganda, I mean, as you say, I think it has a kind of coherence, and the coherence is Trump strong, therefore you're strong with Trump. But that does start to bump up against the real world, right? Or the other way it works is whatever Trump says is the truth. So just listen to whatever Trump says. And that's pleasant and it's easy, but it does start to bump up against the real world. As people see, well, actually Trump can't face down Canada. He can't face down Mexico. He can't actually face people down. He's certainly not making the Russians do what he wants. Like, if anything, everything he says looks like it was, it'd be more elegant in the original Russian. He's not facing down the rest of the world. That's not happening. And what he's doing domestically isn't strength either. It's only strong in the sense of taking things apart, which, isn't what people actually are thinking about it in terms of strength. So I think you're right I think his strong point, which people really underestimate at their peril, is that he's an excellent communicator and that he's very good at making people feel like they're taking part in some project that has to do with strength. But the reality, nevertheless, is that both internationally and domestically, the way he behaves allows the strength, that is to say, the functionality, to leave the system and leave everything a more cluttery mess than it had been before. And I don't think they're actually able to completely control the messaging on this. And I think the fact that what they're doing is making us weaker in every sense, I do think that's eventually going to slip through.
I support your Substack. I'm a subscriber, and I love your Substack musings. And you can I don't know if it's years just that have addled my mind. I wish I could remember all of the juicy stuff in your Substack. So I'm going to have a link to your Substack under this video because I think it is such a great offering, and I will continue to support it. Look, Timothy Snyder, you're a treasure, and I really I love this conversation. I hope we have more. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for the good word, Mark. Great talking.
All right. Yeah. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, kind of exciting to talk to Timothy Snyder. He is the real thing, as you have seen and heard. So I hope he'll be back.
That was a great interview.
Really enjoyed the conversation. He's something. Mm-hmm. Wow. I will have a link to his Substack, which I very much recommend to everyone, and you can read him on a regular basis. Looks like Dr. Fauci. I don't think he.
I didn't think that at all.
I don't think
that's not fake. That's real.
I don't think he looks like Dr. Fauci at all.
You do not know what you are talking about.
Yeah, I don't believe it. But man from the West, 420. Maybe you 420'd a little too much, and he does look like Dr. Fauci to you. I'm going to quickly handle some comments, and then I'm going to get to Kim's news. Do I have anything else? Nothing else, right? Nothing else loaded. Like, I want to get into a couple other stories, but I don't have any other guests, is my point.
No.
Okay. I will get to this story about Vance and his Vermont ski trip in a moment. How about Josh Shapiro, says Vilma, as one of the leaders of the future Democratic Party? Definitely being talked about, very much part of that conversation. The U.S. doesn't need NATO, Karen Cooper says. They'll have Russia, an unbeatable combo, huh? Scary future for sure. Trump was unhinged, bringing up every name he thought betrayed him, de Hagville says. It is funny in that it was mostly about the way they were beaten down on Zelensky. But it is true that, at the end of Terminator, how Terminator became all the different things that it had been. That's what I felt like happened in the Oval Office. Trump just sort of melted down, and he goes, and Hillary Clinton. He mentioned Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden, the Biden. And it's like, holy, dude, you're losing your, And on Ukraine, Jules T says at the end, the outcome will be the same. Betrayal for Ukraine. I mean, it is more than just a passing fact that there was a treaty in place to de-nuke Ukraine. It was an agreement made, and the protection of Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression is a double break in that pact. It's a break because of what Russia has done. They broke the pact. And it's a break if we pull back because we had guaranteed their security.
So I guess we're at a point where America can't be trusted.
Well, this is the problem with Trump, if I can just say this, and I know there are a lot of big MAGA people here. I don't mean to insult our Lord and Savior, but I do.
Is that hard Jesus?
He's hard Jesus. He's Jesus the way he should be, man. That's right. Doesn't take any crap. The problem with Trump is he is so mercurial. He is so capable of a hard pivot. Yeah. Look what he did on crypto. Let's just leave out the part. Crypto was trash. Crypto was illusory. Crypto was a waste. Crypto was a scam. Now we're buying crypto as a nation. I haven't even gotten to the story yet. But we're taking our tax dollars and buying crypto. We're going to have a reserve of cryptocurrency. It is insanity. That is a ripoff. That is a scam. That is a steal. A bunch of people are going to get rich on this crypto, and that's the new kind of get rich quick thing that's going on at the White House with their meme coins and their crypto world run by David Sachs, who doesn't even believe in crypto. I mean, again, these are opportunists. And who's to say if any of us were there, maybe we would move along, get along. But it's extraordinary to me. You're going to put the American taxpayers' money into crypto, and supposedly it's going to strengthen a position. How? How does it strengthen any position? Crypto is a manipulated asset. And there are no real hard assets associated with it. You can't even use it to buy anything. So it's an absolute gamble arbitrage. It's not even an investment. We'll talk to tomorrow Michael Hiltzik, who writes on business for the LA Times. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and we'll talk all about this. But the idea somehow that we've pivoted on this gets back to what I was talking about. We become not only a soft pivot, like we'll take a meeting on it, but we're actually aggressively establishing a branch of government involved with crypto acquisition. So get back to Donald Trump, who again thought crypto was trash, but now he sees opportunity there. Musk is part of it. All of these other guys are part of it. Now his tech bros have got him into crypto. And similarly, he, on the world stage, turns, pivots, is so transactional that you really can't count on him on many of these treaties. So the anxiety around a treaty that has been signed by Donald Trump is real. And more to the point, an anxiety, let's leave Trump out of it, that surrounds treaties signed with America becomes a real anxiety. Look at what happened with the Paris Climate Accord, for just something that doesn't really matter in some way. I mean, it's important, but it doesn't really matter from the standpoint of a policy. It's unenforceable. There are a lot of issues with the Paris Climate Accord, which makes it all the easier to sign it. And there's no reason to pull out of it because it's not really binding anyway. It's kind of a virtue signaling. But it was the first thing that Trump pulled out of in the first Trump administration, and then he pulled out of it again in his Trump 2.0. But that's just an example. He has pulled out of the Iranian nuclear deal. That was part of Obama's brokered deal that he then pulled us out of when he took office. All of a sudden, you realize a deal made with America may only be as solid as the president and the parties to that deal. And when there's a change in America, it could be as radical as the one that we see with Donald Trump and his vision of international relations and international obligations.
Or even, not even if you just don't even change presidencies, it could be just on Trump's whim. Today he feels like it, tomorrow he doesn't.
Yeah, no, that is true as well. So when you're dealing with someone who is so very volatile, it makes it really hard to make an agreement. The one thing, and what I'm getting at with the nuclear deal and the Paris Climate Accords is there was a sense of continuity to American policy. That continuity is gone completely. And so it's very hard now to handicap what is in your interests in terms of connecting to the United States and global concerns, global alliances, and just how transactional is this president? The answer is very. So, all right. Thank you for, this is about the election. Yeah, we're going to do some other stuff on the elections. Mila says, thank you for your excellent reporting on the illegitimacy of the last presidential election. We're talking about an hour-long special that we're going to do to go through some of the statistics that were kind of crammed into a half-hour segment that's out there now. So that would allow me to follow up and say, hey, I didn't really understand. What do you mean on that graphic? Because it's a little overwhelming. So I'll give you more information on that. It may be on a weekend. We'll do it as a live show. And in a perfect world, I would get Greg Palast and I would get the guys from Election Integrity, and we get them all on at the same time. Karen Cooper says, perniciousness is a ding word. It is true. I did uncork perniciousness during that conversation with Timothy Snyder. All right, Kim's News, and I've got some loose ends to pick up, and not the least of which is something that goes back to Pete Hegseth. He's in the news in a bizarro way that relates to so much of what we've been talking about so far today. We are a crowdfunded show. Let me just mention it quickly. First, smash the like button. It doesn't cost you anything.
Iron rod.
Smash it like a boss, baby. Come on.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Do it like an Oscar winner.
Smash it with your iron rod.
The thumbs up helps us, and do subscribe. It's a free show. And that's kind of bringing me to the point. Yeah, I saw this. Since the incident in the Oval Office, the doomsday clock ticked 1 second closer, 1 minute, 29 seconds. It's a scary thought, the nuclear threat. It's a scary thought. Thank you, Richard Delamater, for that. But what I was going to say is that we offer it. We have kind of an NPR PBS model. We offer this as a free show to everybody on YouTube. We break out videos as well. But if the truth be told, we're supported by a core group of people who have been with us from the very beginning, and slowly that group and that circle has increased. But I will always be so grateful to the people who are with us from the very beginning. Many of the names you see in the chat are those people. I'd love to add your name to our crawl at the end of every show. We acknowledge, we update it once a month. We acknowledge everybody who puts these shows on every day. Without you, we would not be here. So join us. To be a Patreon or PayPal supporter, go to the markthompsonshow.com and click Patreon or PayPal. Either one of those links will take you right to it. Patreon is doing something. This is really important. And it won't affect anybody who's an existing Patreon subscriber or supporter. But if you go to Patreon through the Patreon app, they take 30% of the money, which is outrageous, but it has to do with the Apple store. They take 30% from Apple, so Apple, takes the money, and all of a sudden, so for us, it's reduced the contribution by 30%. So we ask you still to go to Patreon, but go through the web, themarkthompsonshow.com, and click the Patreon or PayPal link to join the community and contribute. Again, themarkthompsonshow.com is how you support us. Great. That said, Kim's News, and we continue. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. President Trump is slamming Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for saying the conclusion of the Russian-Ukraine war is very, very far away. Zelensky making the assessment yesterday, 2 days after he and Trump got into the very heated exchange in the Oval Office over the U.S.'s role in possible peace talks with Russia. Today, Trump posted, "This is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelensky, and America will not put up with it for much longer." Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is suspending offensive cyber and information operations against Russia. Where's the what? The news, reported by multiple outlets, is the latest in Trump's administration's foreign policy reversals. Officials say the suspension is intended to last as long as negotiations continue related to ending the Russia-Ukraine war. So again, Hegseth suspending offensive cyber and information operations against Russia.
Yeah, and again, I'll remind everybody that Russia aggressively pursues cyber interactions and attempts to undermine a lot in this country. Well, we know that they've infiltrated all of the computers of government. That happened during the Trump administration, by the way. I mean, for all this stuff about how they're so great and tough on security, I mean, the reality is, of course, they're just the opposite. I mean, you couldn't find a more sloppy crew. But now, this sort of answer to what Russia does through U.S. Cyber Command, they're backing off. I mean, this is so literally Hegseth is being is changing the position of this country and telling U.S. Cyber Command to back off. It's wild. I mean, it's a wildly different country. And by the way, this wasn't a campaign policy that was articulated by Donald Trump. So, I mean, you can't say, oh, well, we knew about this. You're really seeing the warm embrace of Vladimir Putin around the Trump administration and White House.
Russian hackers, forget about it. It's okay. Yeah. A top Health and Human Services spokesperson, HHS spokesperson, is resigning suddenly just weeks after being sworn in. What happened? Tom Corey, he announced on LinkedIn he resigned Friday, effective immediately. Corey served in a similar role during President Trump's first administration. He resigned less than 2 weeks after his swearing in and his appointment.
Wow. That's a big
President
story.
Trump going to address a joint session of Congress tomorrow night. Trump will speak in front of lawmakers from both sides for the first time of his second term. The president will outline the goals of his administration and give his current view of the country. The address begins at 9 p.m. Eastern. Attorney General Pam Bondi says she was misled on the Jeffrey Epstein documents. Bondi said she thought she had all the files related to the investigations into the late disgraced financier and convicted sex offender. She made the comments in defense of last week's widely criticized Epstein document dump. She said a whistleblower informed her after releasing 100 pages of flight logs and Epstein's contact list that the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York is sitting on thousands of pages of documents. So now Bondi is looking to the FBI for more information.
Would you like to apologize for what you've done?
Yeah, they really paraded it out there like these are the Epstein files, right? And then it turns out it was just all the same crap that had been out there in the public.
My bad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I mean, you knew when you saw the headlines, the Epstein files have been released, and then you look at the article and there's nothing new there. What's happening there?
I knew it when I heard that they made a promise that we're going to release the fill in the blank. I knew that the fill in the blank wasn't going to get released. The MLK, the JFK. Yeah, they'll release something. These people are about the theater. They're not into governance of any kind.
The cryptocurrency market is surging. Comes after President Trump announced his plans to create a strategic reserve for crypto. Bitcoin spiked from about $85,000 to $94,000 on Sunday after Trump's announcement on Truth Social. As of Monday, Bitcoin trading at more than $91,400. That's according to CoinMarketCap. The big increase from its 3-month low last Friday when it was at under 78,000. So volatile. Meanwhile, the first ever White House crypto summit is set for Friday. The White House says the summit will host prominent crypto founders, CEOs, and investors. The White House AI and crypto czar, David Sachs, will chair the summit. It'll be run by Bo Hines, the executive director of the president's working group on digital assets.
David Sachs, I used to play cards at his house in San Francisco. He's a super wealthy guy, one of the founders of PayPal. and he was always a very nice guy. But man, he's lost his way. He's become a huge MAGA guy and Trumpy. I also think there's a lot of opportunism there, business opportunism, political opportunism. These guys want tax cuts. They also want looser regulations on tech, which is what they come from and are doing. But the idea that David Sachs, who was crapping all over crypto just a couple of years ago, could now become the crypto czar, that speaks to the utter bankruptcy, intellectual and ethical bankruptcy of this crew. It's unbelievable. It's unprecedented. And this is in a place, Washington, D.C. is already bankrupt of a lot of ethics.
Why,
and
Mark,
these guys take it to a new level.
It's almost like you're saying we don't need a crypto czar.
A strategic...
Why are you yelling?
A strategic reserve of crypto? Are you kidding me?
Why are you yelling?
It's absolute insanity. It is absolute insanity. I'd rather you have a strategic reserve of collectible sneakers than crypto. At least that's a real thing. It's outrageous.
Why are you yelling?
So tomorrow, we're going to have Michael Hiltzik on. He's the Pulitzer Prize-winning writer from the LA Times on business, and he will assist in understanding this lunacy.
Why are you yelling?
All right, next story. Thank
The
you.
Pentagon is changing the name of Fort Moore back to Fort Benning. The fort near Columbus, Georgia, was named Fort Benning after Confederate General Henry Benning. The Pentagon then renamed it to Fort Moore in 2023 after Army Lieutenant General Hal Moore and his wife. It says the Fort Benning name will now honor Corporal Fred G. Benning, a World War I Army veteran. So they're doing this, playing games with which Benning it's named for.
Oh, my God.
President Trump claims angry crowds at Republican town hall events are the result of... You go ahead and guess, Mark.
Democratic plants.
Paid troublemakers. Pretty good.
Yeah.
A number of town hall events held by GOP lawmakers over the congressional recess have seen voters express their dissatisfaction with some of Trump's decisions in his first month back in office. In a post on Truth Social today, Trump said, "It's all part of the game for Democrats, just like our big landslide election. It's not going to work for them." Over the weekend, video on social media showed Kansas Republican Senator Roger Marshall leaving a town hall early after he was shouted down by critics. In an interview with CNN last week, House Speaker Mike Johnson also claimed demonstrators at GOP town halls were paid protesters in many of those places. Pope Francis taking another turn. In an afternoon update, the Vatican said the Pope suffered 2 episodes of acute respiratory failure. He is on life support. Francis has been in the hospital for more than 2 weeks due to bronchitis and pneumonia. The Vatican says his prognosis remains reserved. The man accused of killing 7 in a deadly Illinois July 4th parade shooting in 2022 is pleading guilty. Robert Cremo III's change of plea comes just as opening statements were set to begin today. Hollywood continues to pay tribute to the first responders to the devastating wildfires in Southern California. Los Angeles area fire departments were honored at the Academy Awards Sunday for their firefighters' brave and heroic actions. The firefighters were brought on stage. They received a standing ovation from the Hollywood crowd, and then several firefighters got to read jokes from the teleprompter in a bit that included Oscars host Conan O'Brien.
It was a cute bit.
Hulu says technical issues are to blame for subscribers missing out on the end of Sunday's Academy Awards. The Disney-owned service's stream ended before the Oscars for Best Actress and Best Picture were handed out.
Oh
no.
My God.
Would you like to apologize for what you've done?
Yeah, Hulu should be issuing an apology.
Upset voters posted pictures of their screens on social media showing a message from Hulu saying the live event had ended. An earlier glitch also caused issues for some viewers at the start of the show. This was the first ever Oscars to be live streamed. Apparently, it didn't go so well.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Wow, that is pretty brutal.
When you don't see the best movie of the year or the best actress award, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, those are kind of the biggies.
Lastly, Serena Williams is now the part owner of a WNBA team. The expansion franchise Toronto Tempo will begin playing in 2026. The team announcing today the tennis legend is the newest member of its ownership group. Williams said in a statement, "This moment is not just about basketball, it's about showcasing the true value and potential of female athletes." And Williams will be involved in future jersey designs and merch collaborations with the Toronto Tempo.
The Toronto Tempo. So that's going to, they're going to play in the
WNBA.
Wow. That's pretty wild.
Pretty
Love
good.
That. Have you been to a WNBA game? You must have gone, right?
I haven't.
Oh.
Yeah, I haven't been.
Wow.
Last time I was at a basketball game, I was sent to cover a Warriors championship game.
No.
Yeah, been a while.
I think with a, female empowerment and stuff, maybe you want to go to a WNBA game. That's all I'm saying.
Perhaps.
I mean,
is the Mark Thompson show going to send me to one?
Well, I don't know. Is that what it's going to take? I mean, I'm
because I'll
surprised
go.
as a patriot, I would have thought you've already gone. I mean, so you don't watch the Oscars. You don't go to the WNBA.
No.
I mean, it's just.
You cannot say you love your country.
I don't know. I'm saying that. I'm just saying it's I don't know. I'm for the first time. I'm calling into question your patriotism. Pains me to do it.
This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. No one can say I'm not a Coachella Valley coffee lover or tea lover, as the case may be. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. You get an exclusive Mark Thompson Show discount if you type in Mark T in the code box at checkout. MARKT, the code box.
Of course, it's
Mark
the code
T
box.
is the secret code. Get you 10% off of
I've
your
never
purchase
seen anything like it.
Yeah.
at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And it, as Mark says, is the best coffee that has ever gone past my lips.
It is so good. I love it. I really
Best
do.
tea
love
that has ever gone past my lips.
God,
Yeah.
yes.
CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
Special. Love
I'm
it.
Kim McAllister. This is the Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Feels good.
When they raided Mar-a-Lago, God didn't like that.
I am going to do it. It's not been done before in this hemisphere, but I am going to do it. I know. Would it kill Mark to give away a free bag of coffee once in a while? You're right. We should do. Thank you, Silicon Valley
We should
Blocks.
do that. Absolutely.
We should do that. That is a very good suggestion. I'm going to see to it that our newcomer, Matt, because he has already been overwhelmed with everything we've thrown at him, we're going to put it on his plate. Yeah, he'll make it happen. We'll figure out some cool way that Matt can give away a pound of coffee on this show. Very, very good. Thank you for that suggestion. I wanted to do one more thing, but we're so late. You're kidding.
Can we talk about the Vance ski trip?
Yeah, let's do the Vance ski trip. I want to. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So JD Vance went on vacation.
The Mark Thompson Show.
JD Vance went on vacation, and protesters showed up in Vermont to disrupt his ski trip. We have pictures of it there. Look at all those protesters lining the street.
In the snow. Look at those Vermonters, those hardy folks.
This is Sugarbush, Vermont. Yeah. It is it's a rough ride. They want to go faster to the JD Vance people, but they're in kind of a traffic jam, and there it is. Stand with Ukraine. JD Vance. Zelensky is 10 times the man you are.
That's
Nobody
true.
voted for Putin. Trump serves Putin. Vance disgraces our country. Those are a few of the signs
Here's
that
my
you are
favorite
seeing.
one.
Vance is a traitor. Go ski in Russia.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah.
Go ski in Russia, not Vermont. Get out.
Yeah, so he definitely get some pushback. And,
There were more than 1,000 people that showed up to that protest.
Wow. This is unreal. It's really interesting to see that JD Vance, who again has no real power. You know, we talked about this before. I just mentioned it again. Vice president doesn't do anything. It's one of the jobs that, really sucks in Washington because you don't really have any power sometimes. And this always happens in, it seems, recent administrations. They put you in charge of something. Biden put Kamala Harris in charge of like the crap you're never going to be able to make a change about. Like, one is the border, and two is Middle East tensions. Like you couldn't get a worse assignment, But for the most part, and even in the first Trump administration, when COVID hit, they put Pence in charge of the COVID task force, but then it wasn't real. There was another group, another real task force headed by Jared Kushner. That was the one that was the real task force that was empowered with policy. And the upfront, like hood ornament task force, that was Mike Pence. So it was really just theater. So my point in getting to J.D. Vance is he doesn't really do anything. I don't even know if Trump likes him that much. But all of a sudden he shows up in this Zelensky meeting, and he is the guy who stirs the pot because he's never been for sending money to support Ukraine. Even though, as you heard Timothy Snyder talk about it, it's 0.15% of the overall GDP that we send to Ukraine, even with the inflated numbers they're using. So it's not a ton of money, but it's not about money, obviously. It's about now new loyalties. And J.D. Vance got in there and just made sure that he ran this train off the track. You're not being grateful enough. You're not saying thank you enough. The guy's conversation started with a bunch of thank yous. But J.D. Vance was there to do that which we saw. And then Trump jumped in, and it was just like a gangland slaying. It was really nasty.
How many times is he supposed to say thank you?
Yeah, he said thank you repeatedly at the beginning of the conversation.
What did they want? Did they want him to do the toe sucking the video, the AI video that Trump did to Musk? Is that what they expected from him? That they wanted him to get down on his knees and be subservient? Is that what it was?
I don't think it would have mattered what he did. This was a reverse engineer of a conclusion they've already made. They've already decided we're not going to be part of this anymore. Russia and Putin are really the new relationships that we're exploring. That's the connection that will be increasingly evident in American life and in American foreign policy. And then we go from that to getting to that point. So we have to start up some kind of dust up, et cetera, just to make it clear we're not with this guy anymore. So they've reversed engineered something they've decided on, and then just how are we going to get there? That's what happened in the Oval Office, and it was an embarrassment to humiliate a courageous man. You can say he may be flawed in many ways, Zelensky, not as many ways as our leadership, but the idea that he should be in the White House and be humiliated that way, it was outrageous. It was, again, unprecedented and crazy. So that J.D. Vance's protests ruin his ski vacation, I mean, it seems only fair. I loved his thing. Have you been to Ukraine? When asked, have you come? Because he was making these sort of sweeping statements about it. Mm-hmm. And he said, I've seen it. I've seen news reports. Really?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Thank you, J.D. Vance. Mamalopoulos says, it's nice to see a true American stand up to the values your country is or was known for. Hope you keep on with keeping on. Love from Finland. Are you kidding?
Yay!
Love Finland. Yeah. Love Finland. Lapland. That's where Santa is, I think it's the Santa, am I right?
Yeah.
Somebody Google that, but I'm pretty sure that's
Google it.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, exactly. So, thank you, Finland. Shout out to you. Speaking of Mar-a-Lago drop, did anyone else see the crawl on CNN on Saturday that Trump's documents from the Jack Smith case were returned to Mar-a-Lago? Yes. Peter Newton, thank you for a $5 super chat. There is the picture of them being returned. It was one of the things I was going to get to in Law and Disorder, but I've had to wrap up the show because we just are so far behind. But yes, this is amazing. So all of those documents that were taken by the FBI, they are now being returned to Mar-a-Lago.
Yep.
It is certainly true that Donald Trump is pursuing a policy of grievance and revenge. There is no question about it. Peter Newton says, a little more for the collection plate. I guess the Pope was rooting for Conclave to win. Now we can watch it for what is it for
the next pope? Incense leaves for the next pope.
Oh,
yeah.
incense, yes, for the next post. Yeah. Did you see the SNL cold open? Dr. Evil from Austin Powers as Musk. He glitched like a clown. It was great. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, it really was fun. SNL had a great cold open. Another great show to start the week, says Franco. Thanks for the $20 super chat. He says, thanks to Mark, crew, and guests. Any chance I can get a Sophia Loren? Thank you. I don't have a Sophia Loren, thank you. I have a British thank you. I have a cute...
Thank you so much.
Yeah, like a kind of... and I also...
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much is sort of the Sophia Loren, best we can do. Vladimir Putin gave Pete Hegseth his best bottle of vodka to turn off the cybersecurity. Yeah, is that what it took? Pete Hegseth turned off all that cybersecurity and all of that infrastructure associated with what we do in terms of our aggressive cyber posture toward Russia. Turned it all off for a bottle of vodka. Wow. Andrea Schreiber with a €10 contribution. We only have a problem here in Europe when too many rich people buy Trump's gold card. Then we can only buy defense from Trump. And it goes in circles. Yeah. That $5 million gold card. Yeah, that's right. I blame Tokyo for its destruction. Love Godzilla. Stop blaming Ukraine, says Luis. You know, you'll remember last year, Godzilla did win an Oscar. The Godzilla, as I recall, it might have been for sound design or something like that. They're going to scam the nation, says Quesadilla 79, like Javier Milei did with the dollar to Libra to Argentina mark. Wow. Kim, explain that to me.
I don't know.
You don't know.
I'll take his word for it. Yeah, I don't know.
What?
I think that there's a lot there. I think I got some of it. I'm thinking, oh, I'm understanding this. And then it got a little bit, then I'm thinking maybe I'm not. Trying to privatize Social Security, a depressed Canadian says in 2005, crippled George W.'s second term, and it hurt Paul Ryan's political future in 2012. Yeah, Paul Ryan was behind it as well. Do you think this move could better motivate Democratic opposition? Of course, on some level, it motivates the opposition, but you can motivate the opposition right into a horror show. I mean, obviously, the dismantling of government to this point already has shocked a lot of Americans, and there is overwhelming opposition to what is happening in Washington through Elon Musk. This coexists with Trump, who has this kind of charisma, charm, whatever it is, I don't know, media savvy, and there's a large group of people in this country who share his views and his vision, whatever that means, like anti-DEI, America First. You heard me talking about Timothy Snyder about that, because you can repackage America First in all of these different ways and sort of create the illusion that you're doing stuff for America, and you're not. You're doing it for yourself and your rich oligarchical friends who are now all over Washington like a bad smell. So I would say that we'll see, but I'm not. The more outrageous, I get it, then the more opposition you get, but you can outrageous yourself into a pretty dark place, is my point.
I wonder if hardcore Trumpers that get their Social Security taken away, if that is something that happens, if even then they'll realize that Trump isn't for them and he's not on their side. I wonder what it would take to change minds.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a quality of owning the libs that they enjoy, even if they have to pay something to own the libs. And it's always repackaged somehow. Yeah. We told you it's going to be tough for a little while, but then it's going to get really good. I mean, they live off the lies. So Eric Prince wants $25 billion to hire a 10,000 private army. Yeah, of course, as I mentioned, de Hagbo. Eric Prince will get his money and his privatization. And it's, again, stuff that could be done so much cheaper, so much more economically by government, and is being done by government. I told you, go back to Iraq for Sale, watch that documentary, and see the way in which private contractors take over the roles of U.S. service people, and U.S. service people have to train them, and then we pay these outside contractors 10x of what we were paying the servicemen. I heard that Trump wants to make English the official language of the country. He did it. He did make English the official. I mean, again, he's pulled Spanish and all other languages off the government websites, as he has pulled off all reference to climate change. And we're in a pretty, they've been busy. We'll say that. Rich, we're seeing in real time the brazen metamorphosis from a plutocracy to an oligarchy, democracy, kleptocracy, kakistocracy, gerontocracy, oligarchy, and back to plutocracy, full circle.
I think he just wanted to make you say all of those.
I think so too, because I don't think some of that is, I mean, some of them are the same thing, but I give you mad respect for working it all in. And now you've taken me way past time, and now I have
The Mark Thompson Show.
We have to wrap. I'm grateful for everybody who came by today. Thanks again to Timothy Snyder. Thanks to Gary Dietrich. And tomorrow, the Pulitzer Prize winner, Michael Hiltzik, will be here, and we can truly take down what's happening with a crypto reserve in this country, and also Trump economic policy, as we'll say it. We'll just, I mean, there's a lot going on in Washington, and we'll get Hiltzik's view on that. And also in California, we have a lot of California viewers and listeners, and we'll get into a little bit of the politics and the money associated with the rebuilding efforts in California. Thanks, Mark, Kim, and Matt. Good show. Matt, nice job. I really was impressed with Matt today. Yeah. All right, until tomorrow, I say farewell, and with a note from Shadow Stevens that we are out of time.
I'm Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
But more to the point, Kim does the After Party Live next.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
But sadly, we're out of time. Go over there and watch Kim. Thanks, everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.